Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Jenn Commandments podcast. I am your host, Jenn Wien. I'm an engineer currently working in Wisconsin. I grew up in the Chicagoland area and I went to college in Michigan. I just spent like the last 4 hours unpacking my trauma with my brother. How was your Saturday morning? Whew, has been a crazy fucking morning. On a real note, it was a good conversation. I needed to talk about those things. And so in the last, I want to say 6 months, there's been a shift in our family dynamic. And I'm starting to become an adult in a respected adult in the family. And that transition's sort of hard. If you are in your, early to mid 20s and you're still struggling with those family dynamics, just know that that is very normal. And trauma can add layers to it. And it's not your fault. And it's not, it's not your fault. It's not your parents' fault. It's just a very normal part of evolving your relationship with your family. And just know that it's very normal as human beings to hold resentment for the people that you love the most because you care about them the most. And so it's normal and it's hard to deal with. But it's worth it to continue to have those conversations, and it's worth it to unpack your trauma with your loved ones, because I think that allows you to have like a more honest conversation with your loved ones, with yourself, and like it helps break those generational curses, to have those conversations. And if you really think about it, like, you owe it to yourself and you owe it to your parents, to have those conversations, because one, you owe yourself a family that you don't have to feel uncomfortable around. But also, our parents in a lot of ways don't get to experience what we're experiencing. Like, I feel like we've really started to understand, to the extent that family trauma affects somebody their whole lives, like maybe in the last 20 years, we've sort of come to terms with that. Um, and so, like, our parents likely will never be able to have these conversations with their parents. And so I think it's worth it for both sides, like, I think you'd be able to heal maybe part of the resentment that your parents feel about their parents. You'd be able to clear some resentment that they feel about you, or that you feel about them. I think the tea is those conversations are worth fucking having. Okay. And even though they're fucking hard to have. And I'm still not at a point where I'm willing to have those conversations with my parents. But just being able to have those conversations with somebody in my family who gets those power dynamics, or at least knows the people that I'm talking about, is helpful. So yeah. If you notice, I have a new microphone. As a point as like a breaking point to not talk about my family trauma anymore. Well, like a gateway, or a transition. I realized this week that likely for most people in their lives, the only person who's going to invest in you and not bitch about it afterwards is you. So, invest in yourself if you can, and try not to feel guilty about it. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about Shirley Chisholm. Now, Shirley Chisholm was the first Black woman in Congress, and she ran for president. So we're going to be talking about that. But I think I would like to focus on Shirley, the movie that came out on Netflix in 2024, more than I would like to focus just on Shirley Chisholm, because I would also like to talk about Regina King, because I love Regina King. So, yeah, I watched Shirley like 2 or 3 times this week. So we're gonna get into that a little bit. I don't know. I'm feeling sort of it's just I also watched The Substance last night. Yeah. The Substance was fucking crazy. And that's how my brother and I sort of started talking to we were discussing The Substance, and then we were discussing women, and then how like women hate other women, and then we started talking about my mom. So it's just like the the patriarchy is so ingrained in our interpersonal relationships that it hinders mother-daughter relationships. It hinders mother-son relationships in various ways because like women are used to being disappointed by their husbands. And so when their son is disappointing, it's like, well, and like I don't mean it like that, but it's just like less whatever. So there's layers to every issue. There's interpersonal issue like layers, there are societal layers, there are just layers to every relationship that you'll have, and there are external things that are always going to be a part of them. Um and we can unpack um that stuff a different day. It is the last week of Black History Month, so I don't want to overpower the episode too much. But that's something that's been on my mind. Well, that is this transition into adulthood that I've been going through. I know that sounds silly as maybe like a 25-year-old, and you're like, maybe I should already be an adult in many ways, but I think that what I mean is learning to do the things that I want to do instead of doing the things that like are expected of me, whether those expectations were placed on me explicitly or implicitly, yeah, complicated and it's hard. And additionally, like a woman pushing their daughter to want to do well is out of love, right? It's out of wanting them to not experience the traumas that patriarchy have imparted on their lives. And so while that push is loving, like they want you to be successful so that you never have to experience needing a man the way that women historically had to need a man, that push is out of love, and it's out of respect, and it's out of like just wanting better for your child, but it is also entrapping, you know. So it's layered. Anyway, so we're going to talk about Shirley today. Shirley is on Netflix. It came out last year. Let me look up the date because I feel like I didn't really hear a lot when it came out. So I'm wondering if it came out around Kamala's run to see, to try to like encourage people to get out and vote, or even if it's just to show historically like the only people that show up for Black women are other Black women. And that's kind of it, I guess. Um, that's terrible. Black women are the only people who have ever made me feel understood in the world, sort of. And so that's rough for me. So anyway, sorry. I'm sort of disoriented, so I hope that that's okay. I hope that you will forgive me. Oh, and also, bitch, also activism. God. So, this week somebody posted in our Protecting School District 206 Facebook group that Mark Ayers sexually assaulted their son when he was a child. and this happened in like, I don't know, 2008 or something. I am really, really grateful that she reached out, because it sort of reinvigorated. I was like, oh, she's right. I had been sort of complacent after that Giglio stuff, like got that ball, after the ball got rolling on that. I sort of became complacent. When there are still more than 3 predators at each Bloom and Bloom Trail. So definitely something we're going to be working on. It's hard because I believe that somebody is going to have to press charges against these people in order for them to be taken out of schools until there's a bill that's passed. So there was a bill that was in the House that was like, you're not allowed to talk to a former student if they're more than like 3 or 4 years older than you, or like there's some sort of stipulation that if there's X age gap, you are not to talk to any former student if you're like period, regardless of what their age is. I don't know, that's probably not the exact wording, but it's something like that. And until something like that passes, I don't think that there's a way to get these people fired unless we from my perspective, we have already shown that the school district has a history of putting stuff under the rug, or I don't know if the right phrasing for that is, but like that's, from my perspective, that's clear. But I don't know, law enforcement historically, doesn't give a fuck. So I will let you all know that I'm doing what I can, but I'm also here to let you know that that's all I can do. Um so it's rough. There are times where it feels helpless for sure, but I did say this the other day in a comment section that more has happened in the last year than there has been that's happened in the last 20. So I do feel like we have a lot of momentum. It's just hard to be a catalyst to that momentum, So that's neither here nor there. Anywho, so today we're going to talk about Shirley Chisholm. Shirley Chisholm. So let's do her little, Wikipedia overview. You know a bitch loves a Wikipedia overview. So this says Shirley Anita Chisholm, St. Hill, is her maiden name. Was born on November 30th, 1924, and she was an American politician who, in 1968, became the first Black woman to be elected to the United States Congress. Chisholm represented New York's 12th congressional district, a district centered in Brooklyn, for 7 terms from 1969 to 1983. And then in 1972, she became the first Black candidate for a major party nomination for President of the United States, and the first woman to run for the Democratic Party's presidential nomination. Throughout her career, she was known for taking a resolute stand against economic, social, and political injustices, as well as being a strong supporter of Black civil rights and women's rights. She was born in Brooklyn, New York, and she spent ages 5 through 9 in Barbados, and she always considered herself a Barbadian American. She excelled at school and earned her college degree in the United States. She started working in early childhood education and became involved in local Democratic Party politics in the 1950s. In 1964, overcoming some resistance because she was a woman, she was elected to the New York State Assembly. 4 years later, she was elected to Congress, where she led the expansion of food and nutrition programs for the poor and rose to party leadership. My apologies. She retired from Congress in 1983 and taught at Mount Holyoke College. Is that how you say that? Holyoke? While continuing her political organizing. Although nominated for ambassadorship to Jamaica in 1993, health issues caused her to withdraw. in 2015, Chisholm was after death, posthumously, how do I say that? Posthumously? I've read the word a million times. You ever read, like, I read more in my brain than out loud. The only time I read out loud is for you guys. Post, whatever. She was, after death, she was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. So now that you have sort of like an overview of her, the Shirley movie, Shirley was depicted by Regina King, and I have been a fan of Regina King since Miss Congeniality 2. Y'all ever seen Miss Congeniality 2? Banger. Fucking banger. Both Miss Congeniality movies are so good. Okay. The movie does an excellent job of showing how politics enters every facet of your life, and it does. Hey, it does. And so like we see immediately that Shirley is always around men. And that's normal. I feel that any white collar job is predominantly men because they've hoarded that power their whole lives, or not their whole lives, since the beginning of existence. And so we see that her and her relationship with her husband, what was his name? But like, he was her. Okay. So this movie really unpacked a lot for me because Shirley Chisholm was the embodiment of girl boss. Okay. And you had to be a woman paving those ways for other women. You had to be constantly on the defense because you are constantly faced with like marginalization. So we see that Shirley is assigned by Speaker of the House, which happened to be a Democrat at the time, that she was assigned to be a part of like the Agricultural Committee. And she was like, bitch, I'm from Brooklyn. What the fuck am I going to do? How am I going to help agriculture? Like, I know the concrete jungle. I will not, there's nothing I can do to help. And additionally, I think in those situations, I'm obviously I'm not super familiar with like how politics works yet, but your impact that you can have largely depends on what roles you're given in Congress and whatever. So she saw it as like, I was elected into this role because these people trusted me to help them with their problems, and I cannot help them if I am on the Agricultural Committee. And they're not going to think that I'm doing what I said I was going to do because you're not giving me the opportunity to succeed. You're not viewing my skill set and trying to make, and obviously that people like Shirley Chisholm want to make real change, right? They want to help the common person. And when you get to national politics, you are dealing with career politicians who deal with lobbyists who, like, there is a level of corruption that if you come into politics without, we see throughout the movie that you're not going to have a good time. And it's certainly honorable, right, to not want to, what was her little slogan? I forget. Something in Unbought. Let me see if I can look it up. One thing I don't like about the new mic is I can't put it down while typing. I don't know I will figure it out. It was Unbought and Unbossed, which kind of fucking slays. Like, I feel like it's sort of like the Bernie Sanders effect a little bit. Like, Bernie Sanders is another public servant type leader, and I think that in theory in theory, that should work, right? Like, you care about the common man. Unfortunately, that doesn't benefit the people who have the money. And the people who have the money are the people who are going to win elections. So to a certain extent, you have to, that's why politics is so corrupt, is because, like, in order to win elections, you need to have funding. And in order to get funding, you have to make deals with lobbyists and companies and private sectors. And those private sectors have their own goals, right? So, needless to say, like, our a democratic republic where capitalism is the driving force it's not conducive to a politician like Shirley, right? And we see that throughout the movie, and we see this woman basically give up all of her personal relationships to try to help people. And we see that in a lot of ways it's hard. So basically, okay, the movie starts, like we talked about, with once she gets, like, her agricultural assignment, she sort of starts to realize that this system, it's not going to be, now that getting there is half the battle. Now the work really starts, right? Where, like, she has to go up against this all white, predominantly male force. And often her perspectives are not going to be listened to. And yeah. So then she goes and talks to some students, and she realizes that she has quite a bit of backing. And she's like, listen, like, white boys are saying, why can't I be president? So maybe I should run. And I totally understand this. The, like, I'll just will it to be done mindset. I think a lot of women have this mindset. A lot of women who want to see change. I'm going to reference Little Women again. But there's this part where Jo, I think, or Josephine. So Jo has one of the littlest sisters is sick, and she's like, God, or somebody says God willing, and she goes, well, God has never seen Jo's will, or something. Like, women who so fiercely want to see change in the world I feel like we do genuinely believe that if we just will it to be done enough, it can happen. And largely, it's because that largely, if you're willing to put effort and time into something, largely that can happen. However, this is like, countrywide politics is sort of a different beast. Like, you need to have money, right? Like, you can't just will that, as we see with, like, Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Like, Elon put more money into the campaign, and that's not the only reason why he won, but, like, I think it certainly helps, right? So, and as she runs a very open-minded campaign. She has her head of, like, youth engagement is like a 21-year-old, and he's a law student, and he ends up being one of her, like, right-hand men, and Shirley Chisholm loved McDonald's, by the way. She loved McDonald's, and she loved a strawberry shake from McDonald's. That was very that was one of the running threads in the movie. And then also I do believe that also being from Brooklyn, or like being, so have you guys ever read David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell? He often talks about how if you historically have been marginalized in some way, whether that be because of race, whether that be because of having dyslexia, like there's some crazy percentage of CEOs that are dyslexic, for something, right? And it's because you learn from a young age that you cannot go about things in the mass accepted way. Like, you have to find new routes to get to the same goals as other people. And that becomes sort of your superpower. It is the ability to adapt that leads you to being successful. And I think for anyone that believes that their trauma or their lived experiences are more of a hindrance to their life than a jumping point to, well, I've experienced all these things and I've been okay, so why can't I do XYZ and be okay, right? It is changing your perspective about the things that you've experienced that will lead you to success, I guess. And I think that Shirley is a great example of that. Shirley got endorsements from Black Panthers. She went to a celebrity's house that was considered neutral ground to the Black Panthers. So let's talk about the history of the Black Panthers, I guess. I think that would be good to get into, just as like some context for the time period, because that's hard too. I think we've talked over like the last 3 weeks or so about that time period. So if we look, right, Shirley, she served terms from 1969 to 1983. And if we remember from last week, let me look up, but I think Marsha P was sort of around that same time. There was a time where American politics, it was like the hairspray time where like we were working on integration. We were working on, I think we had just, like, the Vietnam War was happening. So we were coming into consciousness of like the United States historically sort of, because the United States has relied on its militaristic place in the world. Like, okay, have y'all ever played Civilization 6? So if you've ever played Civilization 6, you know that having an empire that isn't military heavy leads to a lot of problems, and it leads to like the downfall of civilizations, right? And so while it's understandable that the United States has had this militaristic perspective since its origin, and that's sort of what the US was built on, right? It was built on rioting, and it was built on sort of like a fuck you to the British government. I do think that like during the Vietnam War, we sort of came into this realization that we have been bullying, or like, I don't know if everybody can, clearly not everyone has come to this realization, but the United States has used their military to bully the rest of the world into submission. And now, because of that, we can't just withdraw from that because we have created so many enemies in the world. And that's really like, I think during this time period, we were like, okay, not only do we mistreat our own people, not only do we mistreat Black people, natives, gay people, like we mistreat our own citizens, but we also go across seas and mistreat other nations as well. So like we were coming into consciousness of that, and that's shown in the movie. And then we're also like the gay rights movement, the women's rights movement. I'm like, the women couldn't have a credit card of their own until the 70s. So like, and that largely it was probably with the help of Shirley, right? So it's just a lot. So that's sort of the historical context for that time period. And because of this, because of the Vietnam War, we started. I think the draft was like made to 18 instead of 21, but let me check. Okay, so I searched, did the draft change to 18 instead of 21 in the Vietnam War? And AI Overview says yes, during the Vietnam War, the draft age was lowered to 18, meaning men could be drafted at 18 years old instead of 21, which was the previous standard. This change significantly impacted the demographics of soldiers serving in the conflict and fueled protests against the war due to the old enough to fight, old enough to vote argument. Oh, so this is also this was also a part of Shirley's like thing. I'm sorry. I don't know if you can tell that I'm anxious because I've been like moving a lot, but so Shirley's thing was like I actually hate the way my body looks like that. Okay. Um so they changed the draft age before they changed the voting age. And so during Shirley's run for president, it was going to be the first like big election, the first like presidential election where 18-year-olds could vote. And so it became very, very, very imperative for candidates to start going to college campuses to get the young vote, you know? And so she did that, and she only went to one college in California. So California is talked about a lot in the movie, and it's known for, because California is obviously always a Democratic state when it comes to presidential elections. It's like but when it comes to getting the Democratic candidate like nomination, it's like it's hard to go to, or like it's winner take all. So if you spend a lot of time there, you have to like hope that you're going to get it. So it might be better to spend more time elsewhere and maybe get more votes widely across different, like that's sort of the thought process. So that's sort of like the time that they were in, right? And as a woman in male dominated fields now, and it being very, very bad for my mental health, I can't even imagine what it was like to be a Black woman trying to get these people to take you seriously, because like, the substance. Have y'all seen that shit? If you haven't, you should. There's this scene where the premise of the substance was like, basically there was this young woman. There's this celebrity. She turns 30, and then she's deemed too old. And then she gets into this car crash, and then this nurse, good-looking nurse, is like, "You'd be a good candidate," and then gives her like this note to take this thing that allows her to be like a skinnier, prettier version of herself, like younger, skinnier, prettier, or whatever, for 7 days. But you have to switch, every 7 days, and that's sort of the whole premise. And her boss, this celebrity boss, there's this scene where he's firing her, like the older version. He's firing her, and during this time, he is just the most gluttonous, masochistic, misogynist piece of garbage that you've ever experienced. And it is so hard to watch that there were multiple times during the substance that I closed my eyes where I was like, I can't watch that. Body horror was crazy. But what was my point? Why did I bring that up as it relates to fucking Shirley Chisholm? Oh, I guess just like we also see sort of a comparative sequence in Shirley the movie, where there is this sort of, again, I'm a white girl who's talking about Black history for Black History Month. Do I have any right to be having any of these opinions about internal Black issues? No. But for the sake of the conversation, I'm just going to bring it up. So there's this man, I forget his name, but he's been in the national political scene for a little bit longer than Shirley has, and they go to dinner and they have to discuss her dropping out of the race, endorse, like they have to make they're making like not under the table deals, but I guess I've never really considered that maybe these politicians meet and discuss their game plans with each other. But like, he basically is like, I'll do this for you if you drop out in this state. Like, they have to discuss, like, I don't know. I can't imagine being in politics on that stage. Like, um, even just like to the extent that I'm involved in the community sort of makes me crazy. So I can't imagine constantly like my nervous system during this protecting school district 206, when that stuff is active, when I'm like actively doing things, my nervous system is constantly in a state of fight or flight, because it's like there are people who are questioning your motives. There are people who are like, it's just a very defensive space. And so, as I can imagine trying to navigate that like, and this man, he's allowed himself to be the Black man in the space, but like, like, it's hard. It's hard to figure out how to navigate being in spaces where you are clearly the odd one out without conforming to the space. So, like, what I mean by that is this man, from my perspective, had been playing the white boys game in politics and like doing fine. But like, it's hard. We talked a little bit about this last week of like, we see individualistic success as a marker of equality when I don't think that's the case. Where like this I think he was mixed. At least in the movie, he looked light skinned, so I don't know if he was like full, like I don't know. But at the end of the day, you must remember that you are still always a part of that marginalized group, and even no matter how much they accept you in the moment, when push comes to shove, they're always just going to protect their own. And I think that Shirley had like a really great like really good understanding of that. And she brought herself fully always into her political, personal, and she brought fully like who she was. She was a woman, and not just a woman, she was a Black woman. And she brought her Black woman perspective into every room that she went in. She never watered down any part of herself, no matter what room she was in. And I think that that's the most inspirational part of Shirley. So yeah. So we witness sort of that dichotomy between playing the white boys game in politics and showing up authentically as yourself into politics. We witness that in this movie. And we witness Shirley's marriage. And I had like a very honest look in the mirror after I watched the movie, because Shirley's husband has like a moment. So there's a moment in the movie, and I'm sure this happened in real life, but like I'm sure that this is a biographical, like it's a biopic. So I don't think that this would be something that they make up, right? I'm sure that this happened plenty. But during one of Shirley's like speeches or whatever, like rallies, somebody attacks her. And Shirley's husband was supposed to be Shirley's like security. And so, and obviously, like working with loved ones is never easy. And so at the end of the night, Shirley and him like have a moment where she was like, "Where the fuck were you? Like, you are supposed to be protecting me. Like, what the fuck happened?" Right? And he has this moment where he's like, "Shirley, you have always wanted your husband to be a shadow of you. And you can't be mad at me when I'm too good at it." Just sit with that. Yeah, that was hard for me to hear the first time too, because I have I have I've always like made a joke that my man, I would enjoy a man, but only if he was silent behind me all the time. Like I only want a man if like he's just like he's like around, he lets me be the star, he lets me be myself, because I've never experienced that in a relationship before, like where a man hasn't been insecure about himself because of who I am. And I would like a confident man who's just like, who's only around when I want him to be around. And that in a lot of ways that is like, it sucks because that is the box that society puts women in all the time. And so I'm sure that it as a woman, if I'm breaking down my own psychology, right? I think as a woman, it's easy to be angry at that and then want to inflict that onto someone else. And seeing that relationship dynamic play out was telling, right? Because neither of them were really fulfilled in the relationship. Neither of them really felt understood or seen in the relationship because they weren't equals, right? She clearly had the power over him. And in a lot of ways, like in theory, right, as a feminist, you're like, gang, gang, period. And however, as we saw in the Barbie movie too, is that really the goal? Is the goal to beat men into submission the way that they've beaten us into submission historically? I wouldn't say that. I'm really glad that the movie showed how that long term, being in that long term fight or flight leads to problems in every facet of your life. Because also we saw that Shirley had problems with her family because of her role in the community and her role in politics. We see that when you are fighting for the world, your personal life suffers. And the power, I believe that Shirley is both a phenomenal role model for any woman, for anyone who feels like they do not belong. But that is the thing that is needed. People who change things aren't supposed to fit in, because if they did fit in, then they wouldn't be changing anything, you know? So I do think that Shirley is a phenomenal role model in that sense, but I also believe that she is an example of what can happen if you allow injustice of the world to like sort of take over your life, I guess. And I don't know if that's like a good way to put it. But when I look at Shirley at the end of the movie, obviously they give you like updates. And after she ran for president, after she gave up on the presidential campaign, like, because she had a bare bones campaign. Like, I think that they tried to run the campaign with like less than $1 million or something, which is crazy. After that, she like pulled out of the campaign. She started to learn the balance of professional versus personal life. And I think that that's a hard balance for women who have been trapped by patriarchy, who so desperately want to break free out of it. I think that it's very common to overwork yourself and then push everyone away from you because of it. Her family resented Shirley for showing up for the community more than she showed up for them. Like her mom and her mom didn't resent her as much, but her sister certainly did, you know. And I think that it's good to show that. It's good to show that without balance, you're never going to be fully happy. You could be Shirley Chisholm. You could be one of the most pave the way women in United States history. She was not only the first woman to run for president, she was a Black woman that ran for president at the beginning of integration. Okay? Like, that's a bad bitch. Okay? Like, she really, that, I don't know how else you could define, like, pave the way or whatever, you know? However, she was deeply unhappy in her personal life during what would be considered the peak of her political career, you know? Everything else suffered. And that's normal. Not normal, but understandable. And after she finds that balance, she finds the courage to allow her and her husband to break it off. They allow each other to do that. And she ends up dating or marrying one of the one of the campaign like manager guys. And throughout the movie, we see that like he is clearly the better fit for her, you know, like he's one of the only people who like truly see Shirley for who she is and what she's and not just seeing Shirley as the girl boss entity that she projects to the world. Like he always wants to make sure that she gets some alone time to eat lunch. And I think that's like I cry. Holy shit. As a hyper independent woman, something as simple as somebody knowing you well enough to know that to get 30 minutes alone, where people aren't needing you to make decisions for them, and to just enjoy McDonald's with a strawberry shake, that's beautiful. And for every girl boss in the world, that's all I could ever hope for you. Somebody who wants you to be able to take the time to decompress because they understand the pressure that you put on yourself, you know? And I think to a large extent, her husband throughout the movie, he understands that too, but it's different, you know? He's not fulfilled by that. He's not fulfilled by, showing up in those ways, you know, being that sort of comfort for her, you know? And that's okay if that's not enough. It's like, it's not a bad thing to not be fulfilled by being somebody's silent shadow, right? Like that's definitely understandable, you know? What else can I talk to y'all about this movie? Guys, I'm exhausted today. It's not y'all. I said that last week too. Shirley came out March 15th, 2024. So it was before we were told that Kamala was going to be running, I think. Obviously they were making this movie before then. I think that it was like it was probably empowering to have that come out around that time. Kamala Harris was the most qualified presidential candidate that has ever been as it relates to experience. She has had experience in every branch of the government, and then has state experience. Like she has seen the process of national politics in every form. And so, but like, she still was not deemed fit to, like, it's just like it's poetic. It's not poetic, but it's just like, just such a sign of sort of still where we're at politically. Shirley as in Surely, Shirley, comma, Shirley had a lasting impact on United States politics and paves the way for integration in ways that we still don't fully understand. I'm sure of that. But I do think that it's interesting to see just how little things have also changed in the last, 60 years or whatever. Because while we have more women in Congress and in those roles, we still largely have like old white people in places. It's still not those. I don't know how long the integration process is going to take, and I don't know if it will ever fully happen. You have to hope that it does, but when I think of like even here in Wisconsin, during the presidential election this last year, I went to a couple rallies for Kamala, or just like I don't know, getting involved locally. And frequently, so we went to a rally that was like in this area, and we like interfaced with these teenage boys who were Trump supporters, and they like basically came to the rally to be intimidating. And I like had this realization of like, oh, these racist people are raising other racist people. And so when is that gonna, I don't know if it will, like, I am so, it's disheartening. I don't know how to make real change, and I don't know how to, and of course, like, from a psychology perspective, me and my therapist have unpacked this a lot of like, of course, white people are going to try to keep their power. Anyone who, and it's just not white people, but anyone who is losing their power over something is going to do everything in their grasp to try to keep that power. Like, they're going to clench on as much as they can. And it's not, like I said, this goes for interpersonal relationships. This is not just like political commentary. This is like just general psychology. Like, as humans, like, we have power over very little. So whether it's conscious or not, if we feel that we have power over someone or something, and those things are starting to push back on that power and want the dynamic to be a bit more equal, you're not gonna like that. You're gonna be like, excuse me, stay in your fucking like, it is human nature to be defensive about that. And so I don't know, it's very complicated, and it's very layered, and it feels crazy. It's hard. And I think that she balanced all of that with very gracefully, much more gracefully than I ever could. I'm not handling it very well right now, and I do it on a very small scale. Like, cheats for sure. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's been a rough day. Like, it's been a rough week, period. And I do largely think that this is probably the most positive episode that we've done during Black History Month. Because she was such a like, positive figure, and she didn't I think the coolest part about her, going back to like the Black Panther thing, we never talked about the history of the Black Panthers like I thought we were gonna. We ended up talking about the Vietnam War instead. But to decide that that is an endorsement that you're willing to stand behind, I think that shows to me that you're not shying away from your, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, it's internal. It's none of my fucking business. Okay, let's look up the Black Panther and Shirley Chisholm interactions. So here is this is from the Harvard Crimson. So it is a old document that dropped in April of 1972. And this is just in their archive. This is called Panthers Endorse Shirley Chisholm. No writers attributed. With a backdrop of posters of Huey Newton and George Jackson, a spokesman for Massachusetts chapter of the Black Panther Party announced yesterday morning that the Panthers will support Rep. Shirley Chisholm for president. The announcement came at a press conference held at the chapter's Roxbury headquarters. Reading from a prepared statement, Gene Jones, a party member, said the Black Panther Party member said, "What? I wish y'all could see this shit." Because, okay, here's the tea. I know I fucking suck at reading, but they don't make it easy on me, okay? Because this shit says Gene Jones, comma, a party member, comma, said. And then it says, quote, the Black Panther Party member, comma, said, comma, another quote, open quote, the Black Panther Party puts forth a call to every Black, poor, and progressive human being across this country to unite together to join Sister Shirley Chisholm's campaign for election to the presidency of the United States. The same statement was released the previous day by Panther Chairman Bobby Scale at the party's national headquarters in Oakland, California. The statement was signed, Huey P. Newton, Servant of the People, Black Panther Party. This is the first time the Panthers have officially involved in election politics. The Washington Post quoted Chisholm saying, the Black Panthers, interviewing all of the other candidates, probably came to the conclusion that in terms of their own aspirations, I would be the best candidate. She added that she will meet soon with Seal and Newton to plan programs for poor people. The Panther statement said that the entire party membership would actively work for Chisholm's election and noted that the control of the economic, political, and social institutions of this society by the people was their basic goal. In endorsing Chisholm, whose slogan is Unbought and Unbossed, the statement said Shirley Chisholm has stood in the face of racism. A lone Black woman denouncing the sufferings of Black and poor people at every opportunity. She is the best social critic of America's injustices to run for presidential office. The statement asked, though, that those people wishing to work for Chisholm contact her campaign headquarters or any Black Panther Party chapter. So basically, Homegirl met with one of the Black Panther, like, head dudes and was like, they had a conversation at this celebrity's house. Based on, like, the movie, I don't know if this actually happened or if it's just, like, a artistic decision. But, you know, I hope that it actually happened this way. They were like, bitch, I'm only going to meet you if it's at neutral ground. And it was a celebrity's house. And Shirley had never really met a celebrity before. So she was a little starstruck as it was. And then she was also meeting a Black Panther on top of it. So she was like, the whole time, you know, she's very comfortable with white powerful people, but like she respected these, you know, and as the article says, that was the first time that the Black Panthers ever like endorsed a presidential candidate, so that was really cool. Additionally, let's look up, see what else they got in this little Google search. Oh, another thing that got brought up that I thought was a good point was, we talked about this a little bit. There was a point where Shirley was like, where are white women? because I have always supported white women. And where are they to support me and Black men? And we even noticed with Kamala Harris that those two entities were largely not the people that supported Black women. So it was just interesting to note that hasn't changed, I guess. Just something to note. Oh, Shirley Chisholm, true story, fact versus fiction. And yep, that's what we're looking for, babe. This is perfect. So, this whole article will tell us what's true versus false based on the movie versus real life. Before there was Hillary Clinton, before even Geraldine Ferraro, there was Shirley Chisholm. She was the first woman to run in 1972 for the Democratic presidential nomination. Margaret K. Smith had run for the Republican nomination in 1964. Oh, so I misspoke before. She wasn't the first woman to run for president, but she was the first to run for the Democratic presidential nomination, as well as the first Black candidate of either sex to seek a major party nomination. And she managed to come fourth out of 15 in terms of delegates, despite a total campaign budget of $300,000. She did, however, become the second Black person elected in the New York State legislature, and in 1968, the first Black woman to be elected to Congress. Chisholm was never a mainstream party insider like Clinton, but she had much more in common with her fellow determinedly independent Brooklyn College alum, Bernie Sanders. Ooh, slay! I love that I brought up Bernie Sanders already. Oh, they get me. Focusing as much on economic and social injustice as on identity politics. As a member of Congress, she introduced more than 50 pieces of legislation aimed at helping women, children, immigrants, people with low incomes, and people of color. Today, her policies would probably label her as a member of the progressive squad, although with her stiff dresses, bouffant, updo, upright posture, and crisp diction, legacies of her Barbadian upbringing, the small and wiry Chisholm was a far cry from Alexandria AOC's, I don't know how to say her full last name, which is my problem, AOC's media-friendly hip beauty. Chisholm looked and sounded like what she was, a no-nonsense West Indian church lady. And she was very, very progressive in her thoughts, but you could tell she was raised like a very strict Christian woman, if that makes sense. Like she gave the vibes of like an older lady in church. Like she was very much like, she reminded me of my Aunt Jackie, which is like silly, but like, yeah, very strict, very like be lady, like, you know. Despite her trailblazer status, Chisholm's profile has receded largely due to her being somewhat marginalized by the Congressional Black Caucus and the leadership of the mainstream civil rights movement, dominated as it was by socially conservative Southern Baptist ministers, both because she plowed her own furrow and because of her gender. When I ran for Congress, when I ran for president, I met more discrimination as a woman than I ever have for being Black. Men are men, she said in 1982. However, similarly marginalized by her civil rights leadership for being unapologetically, y'all, whatever. I actually don't care. I just decided that I don't care about this article, because it really didn't even give me like what I wanted. Oh, did Chisholm really sit down with Huey Newton at Diane Carroll's house? Shirley's young aide and protege, Barbara Lee Christina Jackson, a member of the Black Panther Party, the Oakland-based group that represents the more militant end of the Black liberation movement, offers to set up a meeting with Huey Newton, the Panthers' Minister of Defense, in hopes of getting their endorsement. The meeting takes place at the beautiful Los Angeles home of equally beautiful Diane Carroll, star of Julia, the first U.S. television series to feature a Black woman in a non-stereotypical role, and the first Black woman to win a Tony. Newton comes to the meeting diametrically opposed to much of what Chisholm stands for, including conventional party politics. But Shirley, whose motto, if they won't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair, convinces him that if she can create a coalition of delegates, she can influence the eventual nominee to support more rights for women, Black Americans, and other underrepresented groups. Newton is also deeply skeptical about her visit to Wallace's bedside. I would break bread with the devil if it made him more Christian, Chisholm responds. She gets the Panthers' endorsement. Let's read that back. She said, I would break bread with the devil if it made him more Christian. And that's I think my biggest takeaway from the movie and from learning about her is that to never give up on people. Because no matter what cards you think you have stacked against you, if you can have a conversation with someone and you are radically open-minded with them and radically understanding of them, even if they don't deserve it, I think you can find common ground. You have to be the one that's willing to be vulnerable, right? Like, it's scary to be vulnerable, and it's scary that even if you try to make common ground, that you may not find it. But I think the endeavor is always worth it from my perspective. And she also felt that way, and that was obvious in the way that she cared for every marginalized group. And she cared about non-marginalized groups, even though they largely bullied her out of spaces. So Lee did set up that meeting between Newton and Chisholm at Carol's house, and Chisholm did get the Panthers' endorsement. However, in the film, Lee is presented as a somewhat directionless single mother who does community work with the Panthers, but is not at all interested in conventional politics, which she regards as bourgeois. I don't know. Until Shirley takes Lee under her wing and gets her to volunteer for the campaign. In reality, Lee was already a student at Mills College taking a course that required some campaign field work. She was also politically active as president of the Mills Black Student Union, and in this capacity had invited Chisholm to speak at the college. But she was disillusioned with the established parties and wasn't registered to vote until Chisholm had a word with her. The Democrats didn't bring anything to what I thought they should in terms of an agenda for everyone, for the people, and neither did the Republicans. So I said, forget it. I'll be the Black Student Union president and a community worker in the Black Panther Party. That was my political work, she recalled in 2021. And here comes Shirley Chisholm and convinced me that she thought I had something I could contribute to the political system. And the rest is history. There's a part in the movie where, what was her name? Barbara Lee. Barbara Lee, did end up being her own political figure. But when she goes to Mills College in Oakland, I think, and Chisholm goes and talks to this college, and she sits down with Barbara Lee afterwards in the movie, and Barbara Lee is just so discouraged from politics. And in the movie, she's like, I'm not even registered to vote. And Shirley's like, unless you're involved in the system, you're just someone who's screaming and pouting on the side of the road, or something to that effect. And that really changed my perspective in a lot of ways. Because like we've discussed week after week, sort of my apprehension to getting involved locally. And I think that I've grown out of that a little. I realize that I would like to be involved in some capacity eventually. I don't know if it will be formally within like local politics or not, but I found that like one of my dreams, I figured this out over like the last month or so, is when I was in college, I volunteered at a place called Peace House. It was these two families bought houses that were next to each other, and they sort of put these two houses together, and then after school, it was in sort of like it was sort of in the hood of Kalamazoo, and after school, kids could come there, and for the first hour, they could play, like, Peace House was had been around for a while, so they had like playground equipment donated. They had like basketball hoop. They had all sorts of like kids stuff, you know. And so the first hour you got to play, and then for the second hour you either had to do something quietly or do homework. And we had college volunteers, we had high school volunteers, we had high schoolers who had gone to Peace House and then now were like mentors, you know, just like creating community in ways that will help, you know. And I realized that one of my dreams is to implement a version of that back home. And so that's one of my new goals. And that's really exciting to figure out a way to get involved with something that you love so much. Like I loved my time with Peace House, and as much as I resented home for a long time, I love my community and I will do anything to make it better. And so that this is going to be how I start, right? And it can get bigger. But that's one of my new goals. So that's super exciting to like be inspired by people like Shirley, people the owners of Peace House are people that I still am in contact here and there. So being inspired by people in those communities who I know are making a difference. And it doesn't have to be President of the United States of America. Like there are ways to make impacts that aren't so big and scary, you know, and that's just as valuable. And it pays to find balance in your political and personal life, you know. And Shirley the movie, and her life is such a good inspiration of that. And I'm very grateful that I've gotten to see those lessons in the people who paved the way for us, you know. So yeah. I think I'm good. I think that's good enough. I think yeah. All right. It's been a crazy fucking day. I'm excited to have like next week we're just gonna chit chat, I think. um we're just gonna, you know, yeah. But I've really, really enjoyed. Well, next month is International Women's Month, so and to a large extent, I would like to honor that, and keep on doing episodes that align with whatever month it is currently. You know, I think that's fun. So, and it gives me an excuse to research things that I should be informed of, sort of, you know, and share that with y'all. So. Gang, love that. All right, I'm over it. I love you guys so much. Wash your face, drink some water. Yeah, that's all. Love you. Bye.